in Nevada. That's a risk Nevadans cannot afford to take. H.R. 2587 maintains an employer's ability to locate where they can find the best employees. And that is why I support this legislation, and I strongly urge my colleagues to do the same, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Minnesota reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield to the leader who's leading the fight against outsourcing and for collective bargaining, the minority leader of the House Democrats, the gentlelady from California, Ms. Pelosi. 1 minute.
The gentlelady from California, the minority leader, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding, commend him for his tremendous leadership on behalf of America's workers. Thank you, Mr. Andrews, for your leadership. Mr. Speaker, across the country, Americans of every political party and every background, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, and others, agree that our nation's top priority must be the creation of jobs and economic growth and security. Yet for more than 250 days, the Republican majority in the House has refused to listen to them. The Republicans, have failed to enact a single jobs bill. And the American people do not have the luxury of waiting any longer for Congress to act to create jobs. The President has proposed the American Jobs Act. He's called upon us to pass the bill now, and I support that, as do the Democratic members of the House. But today, instead of passing a jobs bill, we are wasting the time of the Congress by attacking workers instead of strengthening them. We are debating a bill to undermine the foundation of our middle class instead of fighting to put people to work, rebuilding our roads, bridges, railways, broadband lines, schools, airports, water systems. We are voting on a measure to send jobs overseas instead of focusing on how to keep jobs here at home through our Make It in America initiative advanced by our Democratic whip, Mr. Hoyer. Make It in America, how to strengthen our economy and our national security by stopping the erosion of our manufacturing base, indeed by strengthening our manufacturing and industrial base. I want to recognize my colleague, Congressman George Miller, the ranking member on the Committee of Education and Workforce, for his leadership, for his knowledge, for his tireless advocacy, for not only his intellect but his passion on the subject of America's workers. As Congressman Miller has said, Republican colleagues have proposed the so-called Outsourcers' Bill of Rights, or as I prefer to call it, the Outsourcers' Bill of Wrongs, because this legislation has the wrong priorities for America's economy and for American workers. The bill is about more than one company or a single case. It is about the economic security of America's workforce and families. Rather than create jobs, this measure encourages the outsourcing of jobs and undermines the rights of middle-class workers. This bill cuts the National Labor Relations Board, makes it easier for corporations to ship jobs overseas, allows employers to punish their employees for simply exercising their rights to organize, to demand better benefits and safer working conditions, to ensure a full day's pay for a full day's work. For months in Wisconsin, Ohio, and states nationwide, Americans have seen Republican governors and legislatures attack teachers and public servants. And we've seen these workers, union and non-union alike, inspire the nation to fight back. Now Republicans have brought their assault on working Americans to our nation's capital, to the floor of the House, claiming their actions will help the economy. But it will do just the opposite. It will weaken our workers, our middle class, and our families. It's indeed the cornerstones of our economic prosperity, of our middle class, and of our democracy. The Outsourcers' Bill of Wrongs or Rights is not about jobs. It's about dismantling protections established specifically to strengthen the rights of workers. We need these protections now more than ever. Last year, American companies, listen to this, last year American companies created 1.4 million jobs overseas, while raking in enormous profits. We must create these jobs here at home. Democrats will stand strong for our working men and women. We will stay focused on jobs and economic growth. On a personal note, Mr. Speaker, the other night I had one of the thrills of my political lifetime. I received, such an honor for me, the Frances Perkins Award from my colleague Lynn Woolsey, a champion for working families in our country. For those of you who may not know Frances Perkins from history, she was the first woman to serve in the cabinet of a president of the United States. She was the Secretary of Labor, and she was responsible for many important initiatives: the 40-hour work week, ability for workers to bargain collectively. She was a remarkable champion for working people in our country. She was largely responsible for creating Social Security. Imagine having that as her credentials. Imagine what a thrill it was for me to receive an award named for her, especially given by Congresswoman Lynn Woolsey, a champion on the Education and Workforce Committee. Much of what she did, well, the credit was given to the President of the United States. This is appropriate. More than 75 years ago, upon the signing of the National Labor Relations Act, President Franklin Roosevelt said this: "By preventing practices which tend to destroy the independence of labor, this law seeks for every worker within its scope that freedom of choice and action which is justly his." I guess he could have said his or hers, but that independence, that freedom of choice and action has rested at the core of a growing, thriving American workforce. It has not limited the ability of companies to move, to change, or extend their operations. It has simply ensured that companies treat their workers in ways consistent with the laws of our land. The independence and freedom of our workers have helped build and expand our middle class, which is the backbone of our democracy, and drive unprecedented prosperity for our families and for our nation. And it must be preserved in our time. I call upon my colleagues to do just that, to preserve this right in our time. I call upon my colleagues to oppose this legislation, to uphold the value of fairness for our workforce, and to get to work putting the American people back to work by bringing President Obama's bill, the American Jobs Act, to committee and to the floor to again give people hope and confidence and the dignity of a job. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The Minority Leader yields back. The gentleman from New Jersey reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey has 8 3/4 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Minnesota has 9 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll yield 2.5 minutes to a member of the committee, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Ross.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of this legislation on behalf of the American public that has had enough. On behalf of those tens of millions of people who pay their taxes, live within their means, and give their hand to a neighbor in need, for they have had enough. On behalf of those like Boeing, whose innovation, entrepreneurship, and technology ensures that more moms and dads will not have to witness a flag-draped coffin bringing their son or daughter home from a land far away, for they too have had enough. I rise on behalf of those like my dad who fought and bled against tyranny to make sure that the future that he gave to his children would be a future of freedom, for those too have had enough. Mr. Speaker, there is no defending the overzealous oligarchs at the National Labor Relations Board. Their actions are a symptom of a regulatory board gone amok. In fact, the irony of this is if Boeing wants to escape their reach, their jurisdiction, the only way to do so is to move overseas, which is contrary to what any of us want when we want jobs here in America. Nowhere in America should your government be able to tell you what you can or cannot do just because they believe what your intentions are. Mr. Speaker, this administration needs to stop reading minds and start reading the Constitution. The Boeing decision is a vivid reminder that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And we could dismiss it if it were only an isolated case, but it is not. Americans have endured an administration that fines American citizens for not buying a product, raids with guns drawn on an American guitar manufacturer for not shipping jobs overseas, and conducts aerial searches and seizures of American businesses without their knowledge, and orders federal employees not to speak to members of Congress. Mr. Speaker, free enterprise is not the problem. It is the solution. And, Mr. Speaker, contrary to what the other side may say, labor is not the enemy. Labor is the backbone of the American economy. But both should be aware of a government that can tell you what to do just because of what you think. And both should be aware of a government that can tell you what to buy just because they think that's what you need. I pray that this legislation is the cornerstone of a renewed free market citadel called America. The reign of the regulator is over. The American people want their country back, and there are still patriots in this House. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Yields back. The gentleman from Minnesota reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself 10 seconds. I'm sure the gentleman did not mean to imply that those of us who take our side are not patriots. We think patriotism includes the right to freely and collectively bargain, and we stand for it. I'm pleased at this time to yield to a widely respected advocate of the people of the state of Washington. Gentleman from Washington, Mr. Inslee, for 1 minute.
The gentleman from Washington is recognized for 1 minute.
Motion to advise and extend.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very concerned about this outsourcing bill and its tenor. If you want to change what's legal or illegal, then this body should address those issues. But this bill won't change what's legal or illegal. It will simply stop current law from being enforced. The NLRB is a law enforcement body. It follows an independent adjudicative process. And if we want to change the laws it enforces, that's subject to debate. But this bill won't do that, and that's why I'm opposing it. Now, I haven't taken a position on the case that brings us here today, and I don't intend to here. But I can say this firmly. Elected officials should not be politicizing an ongoing adjudicative process. Politics should not interfere with justice in this or any other case. I won't support a bill that doesn't change the underlying law, but only changes the ability of those we've charged with enforcing it with the ability to do so. Don't allow one controversy to sully Uncle Sam's ability for justice in this country.
Time has expired. The gentleman from New Jersey reserves. The gentleman from Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Crawford.
Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Chairman for yielding, and I thank him for his leadership on this issue. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of this bill. I want to start, Mr. Speaker, by making a comparison and contrasting the events recently in the great state of South Carolina with that of my home state of Arkansas. In Arkansas, aerospace is one of our top exports. We have more jobs in Arkansas affiliated with the aerospace industry than any other sector of our manufacturing economy. With aviation manufacturers like Hawker Beechcraft and Dassault Falcon, thousands of Arkansas families enjoy high-paying jobs. Communities, schools, and small businesses are all positively impacted by the aviation industry's choice to locate in Arkansas. But, Mr. Speaker, if the NLRB had had their way, none of this would have ever been a reality in my home state of Arkansas. The recent action by the NLRB is a case of massive overreach that attempts to tell a business where and when they should locate their businesses that employ people and create jobs. You see, Mr. Speaker, South Carolina, along with Arkansas, are right-to-work states. Right-to-work states focus on fostering economic conditions that allow the private sector to create jobs and prosper. And again, not a single job was lost as a result of Boeing's decision to open another manufacturing plant in the state of South Carolina. Yet the NLRB chose to attack the private sector once again. And that's just indicative of this administration's economic agenda that focuses on growing government instead of creating jobs and growing our economy. In closing, Mr. Speaker, the NLRB decision sets a dangerous precedent. This bill is the first step to limit the government overreach that threatens Arkansas companies and job creators all across the country. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Minnesota reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield at this time to a person who understands the international implications of economic growth and collective bargaining, my good friend from California, Mr. Berman, for 1 minute.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and Mr. Andrews. I'd like the proponents of this legislation to look at this fact situation. Let's assume there was compelling evidence that an employer decided to move a production line from one part of the country to another part of the country because he wanted to find a workforce that was white and not African American or not Latino, or that was much more likely not to have women applying to work on that manufacturing line than where he was located. Would anyone here suggest there should be a bill that, notwithstanding Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, should let that employer with a discriminatory motive and a racist intention move his plant for that reason? This is not a bill about what an employer can or cannot do. This is a bill about motivation. The Civil Rights Act, 1964, the right of employees to organize, form unions, bargain collectively, and to prohibit employers from retaliating against that 75 years ago. If you really want to have the job creators do whatever they want, as you like to say, get rid of the workers' right to choose, get rid of collective bargaining, remove the protections against discrimination against union, but don't pretend you're trying to do something for reasons that disguise the motivation for the reason.
The gentleman from New Jersey reserves. The gentleman from Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I need to inquire again about the time remaining.
The gentleman from New Jersey controls 6.5 minutes remaining, and the gentleman from Minnesota 5.
Okay, we're expecting another speaker, but not sure where he is, so at this time I'll reserve and let the gentleman from New Jersey.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New Jersey.
Thank my friend, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to yield this time to a passionate voice to fight the ravages of outsourcing in our country. The gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Cummings, for 2 minutes.
Gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank the gentleman for yielding, and I stand in strong opposition, Mr. Speaker, to this bill. The National Labor Relations Board exists to ensure that companies do not discriminate against workers who exercise their rights under federal law. The protection prevents the illegal offshoring of American jobs. In 2000, for example, a California jewelry manufacturing company took aggressive action to discourage its employees from organizing, a right that is protected under federal law. When the company failed, it announced plans to relocate its operations to Mexico. The board was able to prevent this from happening using the authority this bill would eliminate. The board prevented the company from moving American jobs to Mexico. In H.R. 2587 is enacted, companies will be able to ship jobs overseas in retaliation against American workers exercising their rights. Unfortunately, H.R. 2587 is part of a larger campaign to attack workers' rights. That campaign includes an investigation by the Oversight Committee into the board's ongoing prosecution of the Boeing Company for allegations of illegal retaliation against workers in Washington State for exercising their rights under the law. A Washington Post editorial warned that the committee should not sabotage this ongoing legal process. And 34 law professors urged the committee to let the board do its job without interference. Instead, the committee issued a subpoena, threatened contempt, and even intimidated NLRB attorneys trying to do their job. And H.R. 2587 becomes law. Even if Boeing is found to have violated workers' rights, no remedy will exist to restore those rights to workers. Nobody interested in protecting American jobs should support this bill. I urge my colleagues strongly to vote against 2587, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from New Jersey reserves. The gentleman from Minnesota.
I'll continue to reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New Jersey.
I thank you, friend. I would inquire how much time each side has available at this point.
The gentleman from New Jersey has 4.5 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Minnesota, 5.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'm pleased to yield to a gentlelady who favors job creation over outsourcing. The gentlelady from Hawaii, Ms. Hanabusa, for 1 minute.
The gentlelady from Hawaii is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the gentleman for yielding. H.R. 2587 should be really called the death of the Workers' Rights Act. This amends the National Labor Relations Act of 1935. And remember why that act was created. We were in the Great Depression. So why was it then passed? Because workers could join unions even back then, but they could be fired for joining the union and for striking. Does that sound familiar? This caused great labor unrest in this country, a country that was struggling to get back on its feet. Remember, we're a country of workers. Workers made this country, and workers will continue to make us the great country that we are. What the NLRA said was workers could organize to act in a concerted manner for mutual aid and protection. This act basically eliminates the remedies if that right is violated. Now, remember, the NLRB must prove that these protected rights were violated. They just simply can't go in and act willy-nilly. They have to prove these allegations. There will be no rights for these workers if this bill is allowed to pass. Thank you.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from New Jersey reserves. Gentleman from Minnesota.
Mr. Speaker, it is apparent that we have 2 speakers, a gentleman from Virginia and one from Texas, who apparently are not going to be able to get here on time. So I will be closing when Mr. Andrews has allowed his speakers to speak, so I'll reserve.
The gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New Jersey
I thank my friend from Minnesota. I thank the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, at this time it's my honor to yield to a gentlelady who has been a fierce advocate for jobs for New York City, but more importantly for all of America, the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Clark, for 1 minute.
Gentlelady from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from New Jersey for yielding the time. Today I rise in opposition to H.R. 2587. This bill, which was rammed through committee without so much as a legislative hearing, does not create or protect jobs in spite of its misleading title. What this bill does is give American workers an unfair choice, your rights or your job. H.R. 2587 creates an open season for CEOs to punish workers for exercising their rights. This bill allows companies to relocate or eliminate jobs in retaliation against employees who exercise their right to organize, strike, or engage in collective bargaining activity. This Republican-sponsored bill accomplishes this by eliminating the National Labor Relations Board's power to order work be restored or reinstated. In practical terms, this would mean that if a CEO wanted to punish workers for organizing or striking, the CEO could simply choose to relocate or eliminate the work and thereby eliminate the worker without fear of being held accountable. I ask colleagues to vote to oppose this bill and vote it down today. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from New Jersey has 2.5 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Minnesota continues to reserve. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Speaker, if I may inquire, I believe you just said we have 2.5 minutes left on our side?
That is correct.
With your indulgence in that, the Chairman, our plan would be for me to use those 2.5 minutes and we would rest, and then the Chairman would proceed and we proceed. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the statement from the law professors referenced earlier.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of our time.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, one listens to the back and forth in this debate. There's a lot of different points, and I'm sure some confusion that flows from that. But the debate's really pretty simple, and it's about one question. If a group of people working at a business in this country choose to try to organize a union and bargain collectively for their wages and their working conditions, and the employer is discomforted by that, and the employer comes in and says, I don't like the fact you're trying to form a union and bargain collectively and assert your rights. So I'm moving to Malaysia. I'm out of here. Should that be legal or not? We believe emphatically it should be illegal to say to American workers that they dare to speak up for themselves, they dare to assert their rights, they dare to bargain collectively, therefore their jobs could be moved overseas, is wrong. It is illegal today to do that. Now, in the Boeing case, a judge will decide whether or not Boeing did that. If the judge decides that Boeing didn't, the case is over. If the judge decides that Boeing did, then there'll be remedies that would lie against Boeing. But this is what this case is really about. This issue is really about, this bill is really about, in the lives of daily Americans. How many of our constituents are sick and tired of making a call about their credit card or some other account and realize that the person in the call center at the other end is in Asia and has no idea what they're talking about? If you want more outsourcing, if you think the problem in America is that too many jobs are being created here and we do more for other countries around the world, then this is your bill. But if you've had it with outsourcing, if you want jobs to be created in America, what we ought to do is defeat this bill and rapidly bring to the floor the jobs plan the President of the United States stood in this chamber last week and proposed. Let's stop creating jobs around the world and start creating jobs around America. Let's stand up for collective bargaining and let's defeat this bill. I yield back the balance of our time.
The gentleman from New Jersey yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Minnesota is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself the remainder of our time. This is always an interesting debate on the floor. This has been another example. We have some fundamental differences in how we view the problems and, more importantly, the solutions facing our country. Both sides recognize that we have high unemployment, historically high. We're 30 months of unemployment over 8%. We're 14 million Americans out of work. Both sides want the economy to grow and people to get back to work. But one side believes that more regulations, by the last account some 219 in the pipeline coming from this administration, more regulations, more spending money that we don't have, more government interference will somehow get Americans back to work. And the other side, Mr. Speaker, believes that employers, the private sector, small businesses, entrepreneurs, middle-sized businesses, and large businesses create jobs, put Americans to work. Now, the National Labor Relations Act, as has been discussed, has been around for a long time. Neither side is suggesting that Americans don't have the right to organize and to bargain. I beg to differ with my colleagues on the other side. That's not what this is about. But what we have here is a case where the Act creates a board which, by its nature, changes back and forth depending upon who's in the White House, so that it has more Democrats one time and more Republicans another. And so I would argue and have argued that for some time the board, in enforcing the Act, is causing some whipsaw of the economy. I'll concede that. But right now, with this board, I would argue that, as one of my colleagues on the other side said, that there was an agenda over here. I agree there is an agenda. The board has an agenda. There is a rainfall, a torrent of rulings coming out of this board that strike at the heart of American job creators to create jobs. One of those rulings, and I agree that it's an interim ruling. It's a ruling by the acting general counsel. One guy looks at the actions that a major American company has taken to create more jobs, to spend $1 billion, build a plant in South Carolina, hire over 1,000 people. One guy says, no, I don't think so. I think, says he, this is a transfer of work and it's in retaliation. I think that. And so it's been pointed out this is an ongoing process, and one of my colleagues in the committee said, well, nothing bad has really happened here. let's let this play out. No, no, I beg to differ. Go to Charleston, South Carolina. Talk to those 1,000 employees about their future and the uncertainty that this brings. Talk to the companies who are looking at creating jobs, starting businesses in this country, and are looking at this ruling and the threat this poses and reconsidering their actions. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe we have a choice. We can stand, we can sit, we can watch, or we can step up and try to help Americans get back to work in America by stopping this action and the threat that it poses to companies across America. So I encourage my colleagues to vote for this legislation. Let's get Americans back to work in America, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. All time for debate on the bill has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 372, the previous question is ordered on the bill as amended. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The clerk will read the bill for the third time.
A bill to prohibit the National Labor Relations Board from ordering any employer to close, relocate, or transfer employment under any circumstance.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion to recommit at the desk.
Is the gentleman opposed to the bill?
In its current form, I am.
The gentleman qualifies. The clerk will report the motion.
Mr. Bishop of New York moves to recommit the bill, H.R. 2587, to the Committee on Education and the Workforce with instructions to report the bill back to the House forthwith with the following amendment. At the end of the bill, insert the following. Section 4, protecting U.S. jobs from overseas outsourcing. Nothing in this Act or the amendment made by this Act shall limit the National Labor Relations Board's authority to order an employer to maintain or restore jobs within the United States that have been or will otherwise be outsourced to a foreign country in violation of the National Labor Relations Act.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New York is recognized for 5 minutes in support of his motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the bill before us today would prohibit the National Labor Relations Board from ordering any employer to close, relocate, or transfer employment under any circumstance. Any circumstance? What about jobs that are illegally outsourced to foreign countries like China, India, and the Philippines? Under the Republican bill, if a company sends American jobs overseas illegally, the NLRB is stripped of its authority to do anything about it. Why would any member of this House intentionally want to allow corporations to ship American jobs to China in violation of the law amid the largest American jobs crisis in a generation? Mr. Speaker, my amendment is very simple, and it does not kill the underlying bill. This final amendment simply maintains the National Labor Relations Board ability to go after corporations that illegally outsource jobs overseas. This is just good old-fashioned common sense. Again, I ask, why would we say to corporations, go ahead, violate the law, ship good jobs to India and China. We'll just turn our heads the other way. That doesn't make any sense, and it would certainly kill jobs here in America. Yet, Section 2 of the bill clearly states that the board shall have no power to order any employer to restore or reinstate any work, product, production line, or equipment to rescind any relocation, transfer, subcontracting, or outsourcing. Let me say that again, or outsourcing. The bill makes no exceptions for violations of the law. Why would we want to undermine enforcement of the law rather than address violations of the law? Chairman Klein just said that we have some fundamental differences. He's right. We do. But if we can agree on nothing else, we should be able to agree that outsourcing American jobs to foreign countries like China and India is a scourge on our current efforts to create jobs here at home, and that we should do everything in our power to stop outsourcing. Mr. Speaker, outsourcing is a real problem for our economy. The relentless pursuit of a less expensive workforce to the detriment of the American worker is deplorable. Corporations all over the country are moving the jobs of hardworking Americans overseas. Estimates indicate that American jobs are being sent overseas at a rate of 12,000 to 15,000 jobs per month. According to a study by Duke University, more than 50% of companies have offshoring strategies in place, up from 22% in 2005. Furthermore, 60% of companies currently offshoring say they have plans to aggressively expand outsourcing activities. Finally, the Commerce Department tells us that the American companies cut their workforces in the U.S. by 2.9 million workers over the last decade, while increasing employment overseas by 2.4 million. Mr. Speaker, this final amendment does not kill the bill. It simply allows the cops to go after the robbers. It allows the NLRB to enforce the law when someone violates the law. The amendment does nothing to prevent private businesses from making decisions about where their operations are best located, as long as that activity is not in violation of the National Labor Relations Act. Again, this is just common sense. A vote for this final amendment is a vote to protect American jobs from outsourcing. I urge my colleagues to join me in protecting American jobs. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota rise?
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to the motion to recommit.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the words of my colleague from New York. But if he and others on the other side of the aisle are looking for a way to stop jobs from going overseas, I've got really good news for him. H.R. 2587 is a step in the right direction. Right now, the National Labor Relations Board is exercising an extreme remedy that has a chilling effect on job creators here and potential job creators who would like to come here from abroad. And right now, members of Congress have an opportunity to say stop. But don't take my word for it. Listen to the employers themselves. Recently, the National Association of Manufacturers asked thousands of American manufacturers a simple question about the Boeing complaint. Question was, could this NLRB complaint negatively impact your decisions on hiring or workforce expansion plans? 69% of those manufacturers who responded to the survey said yes. This complaint could negatively impact decisions to grow their businesses and hire new workers. At a recent hearing of the Education and Workforce Committee, the former NLRB chairman, Peter Schomburg, described an encounter with 60 Canadian business leaders. Mr. Schomburg told us, quote, a few with whom I had an opportunity to speak with afterwards expressed real concern about doing business in the United States as a result of the agency's complaint against the Boeing company. Thanks to the NLRB's actions, efforts by manufacturers to hire workers are being undermined, and international employers are concerned about doing business here in the United States. This is the hostile environment to new jobs and economic growth that is created by this decision, and it must end. So as I noted earlier today, we can stand by or sit by, or we can stand up and do something about it. My friends had ample opportunities to offer amendments in committee. They chose not to do that. This is a procedural step. I understand that. Doesn't go to fix the hostile environment that has been brought forward by this activist NLRB. I urge my colleagues to vote no on the motion to recommit and yes on the underlying bill, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Without objection, the previous question is ordered on the motion to recommit. The question is on the motion to recommit. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. The noes have it.
Speaker,
gentleman from New York.
On that, I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, the Chair will reduce to 5 minutes the minimum time for any electronic vote on the question of passage. The question is on the adoption of the motion to recommit. This is a 15-minute vote.
House members now voting on a procedural motion related to a measure that would restrict activities of the National Labor Relations Board. This is a 15-minute vote with a vote on final passage expected to follow. We're going to get to your thoughts on this legislation in just a moment. Joining me is David Harrison, staff writer at Congressional Quarterly. David, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks very much.
Your story in today's CQ says Republican senators are joining their House colleagues in pursuing an anti-regulatory agenda. Can you tell us how?
Well, yeah, senators have, in the last couple of days, have introduced several bills to put a moratorium or freeze on new regulations issued by the Obama administration. They've also been speaking very favorably about the bill that the House of Representatives is now voting on. There seems to be quite a concerted effort, I guess, on both sides of the Capitol to slow what they see as a sort of regulatory excess.
Is there any chance these measures will get to President Obama's desk?
That's unlikely. The Democrats who control the Senate have shown no indication, no sign that they would be willing to bring these bills up on the Senate floor. So for now, it seems like it's more of I guess, a PR exercise than anything else.
What prompted House Majority Leader Eric Cantor to bring today's NLRB bill to the House floor first?
Well, the NLRB, this case that this bill sort of refers to, the Boehner case in South Carolina, has been a real sort of cause célèbre for the GOP. I guess it helps that South Carolina is an important primary state, but Republicans, either those running for president or just rank and file members of the House of Representatives, have been infuriated by this complaint the National Labor Relations Board filed against Boeing, and have definitely made this sort of a rallying cry for the party in 2012.
What other anti-regulatory measures are waiting in the House pipeline?
Well, there are several. I guess Eric Cantor has really been targeting mostly labor and environmental regulations. On the labor side, besides this NLRB that's currently being voted on now, there's one to roll back a measure the NLRB is ruling on making it easier for workers to organize the process to vote to join a union. That's something that they consider a very important vote. They've also have votes scheduled to delay several emissions standards that the EPA in particular is looking at.
How are Democrats responding to these efforts?
They've been, as you can imagine, very, very critical. Representative Miller of California has basically been basically blasted the Republicans for the National Labor Relations Board bill now by saying essentially it would make it much easier for giant companies to ship jobs overseas. It would sort of handcuff this agency that he says basically makes it possible to keep these jobs here at home.
Well, we heard many lawmakers during a House debate today talk about the Boeing company. What have Boeing officials said about this move by House Republicans?
Boeing officials have been fairly quiet about this. Obviously, they would like to be able to keep their plant in operation in Charleston, but they haven't really weighed in on this particular bill. They're, I think, kind of more focused on the complaint, the NLRB complaint that's currently before the administrative law judge. I mean, they're more focused on that right now than on what's going on the legislative side.
And how about unions? What's their take on the impact of the bill?
Unions have been very vocal about this. Richard Trumka, the president of the AFL-CIO, has spoken on this issue repeatedly. They've sent out letters to members of Congress. There was a letter that I think something like 200 or 250 academics have signed decrying this. So for unions, this is a major rallying issue. And in a sense, you could say the unions are using this issue to organize, to recruit, to get people fired up, sort of in the same way that the GOP rank and file is.
And when this issue gets to the Senate, what's likely to happen?
You mean when this bill, this being voted on right now?
Right, yeah.
Probably not a whole lot. The Republicans yesterday held a press conference where Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina was particularly adamant that Majority Leader Harry Reid should bring this bill up. It's unlikely that Harry Reid will do that. I don't think the Democrats have any appetite to make this an issue right now. They're more focused on finding a way to get President Obama's jobs package through.
You can read David Harrison's work online at Congressional Quarterly. Thanks for joining us, David.
Thank you very much.
And we are opening our phone lines to get your thoughts on the NLRB measure. 202-585-3885 for Democrats, 202-585-3886 for Republicans. Independent callers, your number is 202-585-3887. Our first call is on the independent line, Al in Mount Pleasant, Utah.
Yes, sir. Collective bargaining rights are good. They establish the ability for union workers or for workers who belong to the unions to bargain for better wages, safer workplace, and better benefits. What the thing was not established for was for the union hierarchy and their leadership to steal the money from the union workers, subjugate their individual voting rights, and use that money for political purposes. Dick Trumka has absolutely no right to be in the White House. He needs to be thrown out of there. This is ridiculous that union money is being used not for collective bargaining, not for better wages, not for a safer workplace, but for political purposes to pass a specific agenda for the Democratic progressives. If the Democratic Party, the people that are in the Democratic Party, actually woke up and realized that their party has been hijacked by progressive socialists who have a specific agenda to kill our republic and turn it into a democratic socialist state, they would be outraged.
Thanks, Al. We're going to move on to Anthony in Wildwood, New Jersey on the Democrats line.
Yes, this is Anthony. I'm calling in response to, if they want to open up a place in South Carolina, Boeing, why can't they just follow the union rules and hire union workers there? If it's a right-to-work state, shouldn't the same union regulations and rules apply to South Carolina as Washington? I'm not sure about this. I'm just calling my opinion.
Thanks for your viewpoint, Anthony. On to another Anthony, Republican line this time, Roseville, California.
Yeah, I'm watching the motion to recommit 2587 back to committee for an amendment, just to amend the bill so that it doesn't allow for the shipping of jobs overseas.
Correct.
And I'm wondering why the Republicans are voting down the recommitment of the bill. If it seems like it's just a tit-for-tat thing where they're trying to say it should have been dealt with in committee, but they're making like a political play out of it rather than just sending it back to committee and having it amended so that it makes more sense, so it's more passable when it gets to the Senate.
On to Mesa, Arizona. Jan is calling, Republican line.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. I'm watching this. I just shake my head. They're going after Boeing. Why aren't they going after GE that just took all that stuff, Jeffrey email from NASA, and taken it over to China? Our important stuff for our country. And if you look at the President's job bill, it's all for unions, teachers, firemen, policemen, construction workers. The construction workers, they get the union jobs first, and then maybe the little people that aren't union get the meager stuff. This is just a total pathetic. Nancy Pelosi gets up and speaks today. All she talks about, she got an award. If you call her office, the Honorable Nancy Pelosi, the leader, the Democrat, she has to have a name on everything. This is crazy. 1,100 people were put to work by a company that wants to stay in our country, and they're going after them. I mean, America, wake up. Go after GE. Oh, that's right. We can't go after GE. That's the president's head of the economic. Is that right? Isn't that right? Isn't he, Jeffrey Email, the head of the economic of the president?
That's correct. Pensacola, Florida. Susan calling on the Democrats line.
Yes, hello. I just want to say that in 1970, the union saved my job. I worked for General Telephone. It was work for 6 months. I mean, I was hired permanently, but you were on a 6 month probation period. And I just happened to work the weekend past my 6 months. I had excellent reviews. I had no idea this was coming down. They were letting people go, but I did not understand. I was terribly naive. And anyway, they called me into the office on Monday morning and had a resignation sheet for me to sign. And my heart just exploded in my stomach. And I refused to sign the paper because I didn't do anything wrong. And for me, I mean, that was a huge thing.
What was the outcome of that? What happened?
What was the outcome was that I went to the cafeteria. I said something to a lady in there. She gave me the union number. She goes, don't call in here. Go outside to the payphone. I did so. I met with a union representative that night. And in 2 or 3 days, all the representatives for the union were in that office with the head of the telephone company in there. And I got my job back. And the lady said to me, the lady who was in charge of the phone company said, do not tell anyone what happened. And I went out and I told everybody exactly what happened.
Thanks for your call. The Associated Press describes the story this way. The measure would keep the National Labor Relations Board from ordering an employer to shut down plants or relocate jobs, even if a company illegally retaliates against unionized employees by moving work. Republican lawmakers say the board should not have the power to dictate where a private business can locate. Union leaders claim the bill would render toothless the board's ability to enforce labor laws when companies simply eliminate work to get rid of employees who are pro-union. And Democrats say the measure would give companies a free pass to punish employees for simply exercising their rights to organize. On to your phone calls. Next to Ralph on the independent line. Ralph calling from Bethlehem, Georgia.
Yeah, I'm just calling to say that I support the bill. I am an ex-union employee, and I do stand by the unions in some things. But I do believe that if a company is keeping the union workers in one state, but opening a plant in another state that is non-union, I don't get where the union's losing. They're not losing any jobs in that area of the work. And for us to be stopping companies from expanding right now to giving people jobs in our country, this is crazy.
Donald's calling from Reno, Nevada. He is on the Democrats' line.
Yeah, I was just calling to say I've been union my whole life. I've done nothing but work union. If it wasn't for the unions, we would be paid $1 an hour. And you can't tell me Congress there is not using all the union rules. And they're just saying they're not union, but they're getting paid basically. They got a good benefit package. It costs the Americans $17,000 a year for each one of them. So how can they run the unions down? They're basically using the same format that unions do. You get good insurance, you get good pay. But one thing about us, we did our job. They're not. I think it's time for them to take a huge pay cut to about $74,000 a year, cut off the credit card so we don't have $400 dinners and Boehner playing golf every day on the company credit card. This stuff's got to stop.
Thanks for your calls. Votes on a procedural motion right now, final passage coming up. Last week, President Obama offered his jobs plan to a joint session of Congress. Well, today, House Speaker Boehner is giving the GOP jobs plan. He's speaking at the Ronald Reagan Building here in Washington. It's hosted by the Economic Club of Washington, and it's underway right now.
And it's the private sector. This building's named in memory of former President Ronald Reagan, who recognized that private sector job creators are at the heart of our economy, and they always have been, that I was raised in. I think a lot of you know my father, my grandfather were small business people. They ran a tavern in Cincinnati, Ohio that my grandfather started back in the 30s. I worked in that tavern growing up. A lot of things you can learn working in a bar. Tell you more about that later. But listen, I ran a small business myself, and I was 25 years old and went to work for a guy, and he passed away, and I suddenly found myself in a small business where I had one real live customer, and I was hanging on, trying to succeed. But I know what it means to meet a payroll, to hire people, and to create jobs in the private sector. And here in Washington, there's a fundamental misunderstanding of the economy, and it's led to an awful lot of bad decisions. And the reality is that employers will hire if they've got the right incentives. But the incentives have to outweigh the costs. As an example, businesses aren't going to hire someone because the government's going to give them a $4,000 tax credit if the government mandates that are imposed on them cost a lot more than that temporary credit. And in recent years, these mandates have been overwhelming. Private sector job creators of all sizes have been pummeled by decisions being made right here in Washington. They've been slammed by uncertainty from the constant threat of new taxes, out-of-control spending, and unnecessary regulation from a government that's always micromanaging, meddling, and manipulating. They've been hurt by government ideas that offer short-term gimmicks rather than fundamental reforms that will encourage long-term economic growth. They've been hampered by a government that offers confusion to entrepreneurs and job creators when there needs to be clarity. They've been undercut by a government that favors crony capitalism and businesses deemed to be too big to fail over the small banks and small businesses that are at the heart of our economy. And they've been antagonized by a government that favors bureaucrats over market-based solutions. They've been demoralized by a government that causes despair when what we really need is to provide reassurance and inspire hope in our economy. And my worry is that even after all of this, much of the talk in Washington right now is basically about more of the same. More initiatives that seem to have more to do with the next election than the next generation. It's these economic decisions that are being made here ought to be made to help liberate our economy. And I think the American people are worried about all of this as I am. I can tell you the American people, private sector job creators, they're rattled by what they've seen out of this town over the last few years. And my worry is that the American job creators is that all the uncertainty is turning to fear, and that this toxic environment for job creation may be a permanent one. Job creators in America basically are on strike. And the problem is not confusion about the policies, it's the policies themselves. And the anger many Americans have been feeling in recent years is beginning to turn to fear, and it's fear of our future. That bothers me, and frankly, I think it should bother all of us. America is a land of opportunity, and it always has been. And our economy has been built on opportunity, on entrepreneurs, innovators, risk-takers willing to take a chance because they're confident if they work hard, they've got a chance to succeed. And over the past few years, governments made people less confident, not more confident that they can succeed. More and more Americans are realizing this, and they're speaking out about it. The last 6 weeks or so, I've traveled through my district and across the country listening to people outside of Washington who are the key to making America work. My message today on their behalf is this. This isn't that hard. What we need to do is liberate the economy from the shackles of Washington. Let our economy grow. I think we need to trust in the good judgment of the American people. You know, the instinct of government always is this, to get bigger, more meddlesome, more intrusive. And that instinct is at direct odds with what is needed to make the American economy move. Job creation in America is facing what I would call a triple threat from our government. And I think the first aspect of that threat is excessive regulation. During the joint session last week, I hosted about a dozen job creators from the private sector as guests in the House gallery. All of them with a common story. They're trying to help create more American jobs, but in each case, the government is getting in their way. And we all know some regulations are needed. We've got a responsibility under the Constitution to regulate interstate commerce. There are reasonable regulations that protect our children and keep our environment clean. Well, then there are excessive regulations that unnecessarily increase the cost for consumers and small businesses. And those excessive regulations are making it harder for our economy to create jobs. Over the past couple of months, we've seen two vivid illustrations. Last month, agents raided the Gibson Guitar Factory in Tennessee. Gibson, a well-respected American company that employs thousands of people. And the company's cost as a result of the raid are an estimated $2 to $3 million. Why? because Gibson bought wood overseas to make guitars in America. The other example is in South Carolina, where the Boeing company recently completed a plant that will create thousands of new full-time jobs for American workers, only to be sued by a federal agency that wants to shut it down. Now, let me make sure I've got this right. American companies are free to go create jobs in China, but they aren't free to create jobs in South Carolina. You know, at this moment, the administration has 219 rules in the works that will cost the American economy at least $100 million each. This means under the current Washington agenda, our economy is poised to take a hit from the government of at least $100 million, at least 219 times. And I think it's reasonable to ask, is it wise to be doing all of this right now? The current regulatory burden coming out of Washington far exceeds the government's constitutional mandate, and it's hurting job creation in our country at a time when we can least afford it. Government's threat to job creation has two other components. One is the current tax code, which discourages investments and rewards special interest. It strikes me as odd that at a time when it's clear the tax code needs to be fundamentally reformed, the first instinct to come out of Washington is to come up with a new host of tax credits that make the tax code more complex. You know, and the final aspect is the spending binge that's been going on here in Washington. It's created a massive debt crisis that poses a direct threat to our country's ability to create jobs and to prosper. There are some people in this town who still deny this, who still deny that our debt is a threat to jobs. But if you talk to anybody outside of Washington who has to meet a payroll, they'll tell you that out-of-control spending in Washington is one of the things that concerns them most about our future. You know, back in May, I was in New York City, and I warned that if we didn't take action soon, the markets would take action for us. Well, last month the markets took action in the form of a debt downgrade and the possibility of future downgrades that caused the markets to tumble. And it's going to keep happening until we, as a government, act. And the responsibility for fixing this toxic environment for job creation is a bipartisan one. The situation was created by Washington's inability to let our economy work. It was created by government intrusion and micromanagement. And I think we've got a responsibility to work together in the coming months to remove these barriers and to liberate our economy. This is what
On this vote, the ayes are 188.
Mr. Johnson of Georgia. Mr. Johnson of Georgia votes aye.
On this vote, the